Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Welcome to the committee, Mr. Weston. You know, Deputy Prime Minister Freeland and Industry Minister Champagne, they had said that all the CEOs had agreed to stabilize food prices after the meeting in September. But following that, Metro CEO Eric LaFlèche said that it did absolutely nothing to change prices. So we have conflicting accounts, and I want to know from you, who is telling the truth? Is it Metro or the Liberal government?
I can't speak to Metro's perspective. I know that
it makes that statement that it did absolutely nothing. Are you in agreement with that, or with the Liberal government's contention?
In our case, that meeting resulted in materially lower prices in the 35 items and categories, that we communicated here to this committee. But it's important also to note, and I think the message that Eric was perhaps trying to communicate, is that we have been making collective efforts as an industry for months and months and months, and we don't want this to turn into, well, the only reason food prices are lower is because...
I don't want to dwell too much. I just wanted to get an initial answer to that first question. Now, you are the former CEO responsible for Loblaw. You've changed positions, but we do live in a country where we have 7 million Canadians, a record number, having to access food banks due to high grocery prices. What do you say to that astounding figure, and do you know how many of them might be Loblaw employees?
It's any way you look at it, the affordability challenges faced, in this country, whether it's food, gas, electricity bills, or mortgage prices. There is enormous pressure on Canadians, and 7 million, 2 million, 4 million. It's all too many people.
But do you know how many of your employees are having to access food banks?
I don't know specifically how many employees access food banks, but I'm sure it is a material number.
Okay. I think why this is such an emotional issue is because your stores sell the necessities of life, whether it's food, drink, or medicines. And you talked about the fact that you expect food prices to stabilize over the next year, but we just got a report saying that in 2024 they expect the annual cost for a family of four to go up to over $16,000, which is a $700 increase. So a lot of families, I think, in my region would look at that and say, well, that's not really stabilization. So they look at that. That's the reality for their life. And in your last quarter, you posted, the Q3, you posted a $621 million profit. The same quarter of the year before, $556 million. So now you've come to this committee, you've explained, your position on food price inflation. But when people in my riding are going through these incredible challenges, food prices are expected to go up again next year. It seems like ordinary Canadians are shouldering all of the hurt and all of the struggle, while corporations like yours, in the midst of all of this pain and struggle, are still posting record profits. Now, you may argue it's not coming from food, but you're still taking money from Canadians in other areas, and that's leaving them probably less to spend on food elsewhere.
So this is an important point, because as a grocery store business, as any private enterprise, our goal is to grow our business. It's to increase the number of customers. It's to invest in communities, to build more stores, to increase the amount of sales. And if we can increase the amount of sales, then the profit of the enterprise goes up. So there should be record profits in a way with a successful company every year, year after year. That is not an indication of bad practice. It's not an indication of some sort of profiteering. It's just an indication of a business operating exactly the way that it should. And when you think about a grocery industry at 3% of the total value of a grocery basket being profit, that's the smallest number in the large industries across Canada. So there's no evidence at all of profiteering or excess. But I do understand that Canadians are feeling this pressure, and they look at these big numbers and they think to themselves, gosh, if that company would not make so much profit, our food prices would go down.
Thank you, Mr.
But that's not the way that it would actually work.
I have limited time, and I want to get one more question. I think it's fair in these times when so many are struggling, including many employees in your stores, to talk about executive compensation, because the gulf between what top executives earn and what employees earn has turned into a chasm, frankly. Now, your total compensation inflation in 2022 was $11.7 million, which was nearly a 1.1 million increase from the previous years. I was wondering if you could explain to Canadians and probably to your employees why you make 431 times more than your average employee. Because, I have a quote from Unifor. The local at one of your stores said, quote, "Loblaw workers are fed up with the out-of-control disparity between their wages, the company's enormous profits, and the high cost of living. You know it's bad when workers at Canada's largest grocery store are struggling to afford their own food, even at discount stores like No Frills." How do you respond to that, Mr. Weston?
Well, first of all, I am extremely empathetic to the circumstances that Canadians face who are struggling to put food on their tables, and all of the cost pressures that they're experiencing are contributing to that. And so that's why we're focused as an enterprise on finding ways to lower prices. In the last 12 weeks alone, we've invested $438 million in lower prices. As I mentioned, many of those prices are lower than they were, 4 years ago. I get that my compensation is a big number. It certainly, it's a big number, and I understand that completely. It's reasonable in the context of other executive pay.
431 times your average employee is reasonable?
Mr. McGregor, you're at time, so I appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Weston, the Code of Conduct Industry Group's response to your company was pretty scathing. They said that contrary to your claims, there was no evidence to suggest the code will either raise food prices or negatively impact the ability of retailers to meet consumer demand. And they said, if anything, all the available evidence actually shows that it will curb grocery price inflation. I'm just wondering, is your apprehension about the code more due to the fact that you think it's going to actually hurt Loblaw's bottom line instead of negatively impacting consumers? Because they've kind of laid out a fairly substantial case here to refute everything that you've said so far.
I guess it's we have data, they have data. Our data is pretty compelling on this front, and we have laid it out in very specific terms. I don't believe that others have done it in quite the same way. And so, we believe our data is right. It's, it takes a little bit of courage, to stand in the way of something like this. And as I said, we're not trying to stop it. We're just trying to find ways to modify it, to reduce risk. I've had outreach from multiple manufacturers who have said explicitly, that they applaud the courage and that they agree that this code has the potential to increase food prices.
Thank you. And I just want to go back to my earlier intervention with you on food bank usage. I've asked this question to Mr. Medline, to Mr. Guevara. Just the fact that, we do have firm evidence that many of your employees are struggling to make ends meet, and some are using food banks. And I think that it's very relevant when we're discussing food price inflation to also look at the examples that various companies are setting. So for this company, do you have a number or any interest as a CEO of the number of your employees that are actually having to access a food bank? Because this directly speaks to your ability to pay a living wage.
So food prices are the most important reason that we're here today. And I can tell you that Loblaw believes wholeheartedly in fair pay. We offer some of the most competitive wages in the industry. The fact remains that a large portion of our colleague base is part-time. And the reason they're part-time is because shoppers don't shop all the way throughout the day. They shop in the evening and they shop on the weekends. And so we need to have people working in the evenings and working on weekends. They need to be part-time shifts, part-time jobs. Part-time jobs, tend to have wage rates that are closer to minimum wage. As you know, we have a minimum wage system in across the provinces that is now is indexed to inflation. Since 2019, minimum wage has increased over 20%, and our pay in our unionized labor force, which is the substantive portion of our employees, has increased commensurately, with that minimum wage increase. And so, look, there's always opportunity, but we need to make sure that we're a productive and efficient, organization. And we've got to do it while making sure that we're paying absolutely the right wages for the industry. If you took our average wage as an enterprise, it's over $19 an hour, and that is regarded as a general, statement as in line with a living wage.
Thank you, Mr. Weston. Thank you, Mr. McGregor. Now, colleagues, we're getting close to time.